You're listening to the Play Therapy Podcast with Dr. Brenna Hicks, your source for centered and focused play therapy coaching.
Hi, I'm Dr. Brenna Hicks, the Kid Counselor. This is the Play Therapy Podcast, where you get a master class in child-centered play therapy and practical support and application for your work with children and their families. In today's episode, y'all, it's another lightning round. I can't keep up with the questions these days, so every once in a while I have to just bust out a whole bunch of them. So here we are. We're going to do 5 today. So sit down, put on your seatbelts. Maybe this is a good episode to go exercise to. And this is so funny, but I've had so many people tell me that they speed me up on when they listen. So I was like, gosh, if you put me on like 1.5, you probably feel like you need to be on a treadmill or something, because I talk fast anyway. So to speed me up to 1.5, I feel like you have to be doing something that requires a lot of energy, because I'm pretty sure you don't want to be like trying to relax and listen to me at 1.5 speed. So anyway, thank you all for taking me with you to all the random places that you go and all the different things that you do with me. So I always love hearing all the different environments in which you're hearing my voice each week. So maybe go run a mile or something when you listen to this one. Okay. So we're going to cover 5 questions from 4 listeners, and I think this is going to be really helpful. By the way, as a note, public service announcement maybe, if you would love to have access to ask me questions on a weekly basis and not have to submit for a podcast that you typically have to wait 1 to 2 months for, I'm so sorry for the delay. I can't handle all the questions that come in. So if you would like access to me and get to ask me questions and have a weekly call with me, then you need to join the collective. So go to ccptcollective.com. You can get a free trial, check it out. There's a lot of people in there from all over the world, and twice a week you get to be on a call, and there's always time for questions and answers. So if you feel you would benefit from being able to toss ideas around, there's a whole community of child-centered practitioners that are happy to share their thoughts and experiences and opinions as well. So it's been a really cool thing. Check out ccptcollective.com if you don't want to have to wait for the questions on the episodes. All right, so we're going to talk through Pamela's question. Actually, she submitted 2. So we're going to do 2 of hers, and then we're going to move on to 3 other questions. So here we go. All right. Pam's question from Texas, by the way. Hello to my Texans out there. I'm probably this year heading to Texas for a Rays Rangers game. So I will make you all aware of when I'm heading that way. And, you come hang out with me at the Rays game and we'll have so much fun. All right. So the question from Pam in Texas is, number 1, what happens when a child with whom you're working keeps getting bad, that's in quotes from her email, bad behavior notes from the teacher, and how to handle that? Oh my gosh, the bane of my existence. So let me read you that question and then I'll share some thoughts. How do we support parents when they continue to receive teacher notes stating, quote, bad behaviors from their child's teacher who does not see the need for or benefit of CCPT techniques, use of the 4 pillars, et cetera, to support the child? So let me pause right there and say, based on Pam's description there, I suspect it's already been offered. Hey, it would probably be really helpful if in the classroom you do blah, 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 right? X, Y, Z. And it seems as though the teacher is not interested in the least. So I feel like that was a noteworthy piece of this. The parent and I both feel that the child is continuously being punished instead of using these moments as a teaching tool. The teacher seems to believe that the Band-Aid discipline is the way to go rather than teaching the child for long-term success. Thank goodness the child's parents are on board with CCPT. Yes, thank God for that. I love it when parents are on board and doing the best they can to support their child. Any ideas, suggestions, or guidance as to how to move forward with this challenge would be appreciated. All right, so number 1, and I think, Pam, you've probably already done it, but number 1, in a scenario like that, we let the parent know that we are happy to discuss everything that's going on with the teacher. So this is not us reaching out to the school. This is not us reaching out to the teacher as like a cold solicitation, because that rarely, if ever, goes well. Parent is the liaison. So we let the parent know we are happy to discuss anything with the teacher, and we would be happy for them to email introduce us or to put us in contact with each other. There are still times when a teacher has no desire to do this, even when the parent tries to act as the go-between. However, it's very important that we offer. And here's what we want to do in that scenario. And we actually have talked about this in the collective as well as the coaching program. We want to make sure that we are offering support and we are offering to help, not that we're coming in and telling the teacher how to do classroom management. And trust me, it is hard because teachers are not trained in what we are trained in. We're not trained in curriculum planning, right? We went to grad school and we didn't learn how to lesson plan for math or science, okay? So likewise, they didn't learn child development. They didn't learn mental health information from a child perspective. So we're operating from very different wheelhouses, okay? So teachers don't want us to come in and say, well, if you would do this and this and this, like everything would be better. They're not coming in telling us how to do our jobs. We should not either. So the approach has to be very gentle, very supportive, very helpful, and just offering, I'm wondering what I might do to support you. I'm wondering what you need from me. I'm wondering how we could collaborate to better help this child, right? So that is a very intentional approach that we need to use in a scenario like that. Okay, next consideration. When we see that the child continues to have issues at school and we see resolution of these issues in all other environments, which Pam didn't say that, but I'm just throwing this out there because I suspect that this might be more severe at school than it is elsewhere. So when we've seen resolution or reduction of behaviors at home, when we've seen resolution and reduction of behaviors in the playroom, when the child is actually regulated in all of the other environments except at school, what do we know? What can we deduce from that kind of scenario? I'm sure you all just yelled at your at your speaker. It is that the child has a relational dynamic issue at school. So there is an environmental struggle isolated to school, which likely means it's a relationship-based issue. So the child doesn't feel understood by the teacher. The child doesn't feel accepted by the teacher. The child doesn't feel that they can trust the teacher. There's a negative vibe between them. The child has been pathologized. The child has been branded as the bad kid. I'm air quoting that. There is no such thing, et cetera, et cetera. So when we understand isolated behavior struggles, we then can say, well, it's 100% in that environment, likely tied to the relationship. Here's the catch-22. No teacher wants us to say, well, we've pretty much decided that you are the single-handed root cause of all of this child's problems because this child is lovely everywhere else. Okay, that's really not going to go over well. But what we can say is, we've seen evidence that this child is capable of self-control and self-regulation in all of the other environments. For some reason, it hasn't carried over to school yet, so let's troubleshoot this. At home, we've seen resolution. In the playroom, we've seen resolution. At karate, we've seen resolution. We see evidence that the child is capable of self-control and self-regulation and appropriate behavior. So the fact that it hasn't been demonstrated at school yet, there's a reason. Let's figure it out. And then it becomes like a collaborative investigation, and they're usually a little bit more interested in that than just being told it's their problem, which it is, let's be real, right? But we don't say that. We keep those thoughts to ourselves. Okay. And then finally, here is what a teacher should be helped with if they are receptive in a scenario like this. They really need to recognize that the more accepting they are of the child, the better the child will be behaved. And that flies in the face of all academic approach to behavior issues. So it is not going to be aligned at all with what the teacher does or has been trained to do. But the more accepting you are, the more you recognize the why behind the behavior, the more the child will behave in self-enhancing ways. This is proven, empirically supported. All right. So teacher needs to understand that the more grace, the more patience, the more understanding, the more acceptance that is extended, the better the child's behavior will be. Now, how do we support that from outside of the classroom though? Mom and dad need to be coached on how to set limits and provide consequence choice giving for behaviors at school. Because there are still things that need to be limit set if the child is behaving inappropriately at school. So you would help the parents actually understand what the limit setting process looks like, what choice giving looks like for consequences. And that would be a conversation that mom and dad have with the child, in addition to the teacher, hopefully, being more loving and accepting and patient and gracious to the child. All right, so I hope that is helpful. We all always deal with situations with school, with teachers, with notes, with staff. It is a tricky balance. So that was a really helpful question, Pam. Thank you for that. Okay, so then the second question that she sent is about termination. So when do we know that the child has truly ready to move into the termination phase? So let's hear her question, and then we'll talk through that a little bit too. So she has an 8-year-old client that was adopted at birth. The child knows they're adopted, and they look physically different from the parents as well as older siblings. The child is the youngest by quite a pretty big age range. And this seems to be a big challenge for the child. Even at school, the child is a minority, seems to be stuck in trying to figure out her place in the world, but the family is very supportive. The child continually tells mom she loves attending play therapy and doesn't want to stop, but my goal is for the child to progress and eventually come to a place where she's ready to complete her therapeutic journey. I'm still learning how to notice and work through themes. So she has identified power and control, aggression, nurturing, and good versus bad. And then she says, how do we know when the child is ready to move into termination? What if an old theme comes back occasionally? Does this mean that the child really did not complete the theme? Any ideas, suggestions, or guidance would be appreciated. All right. So we've actually talked about the termination process quite a bit in the coaching program. That's something that comes up all the time. So you're not alone in that, Pam. I promise this is a pretty consistent question. But as a general rule, you want to keep in mind that when all of the original presenting issues have either improved or resolved, that's a really helpful indication that the child doesn't have any more work to do. So whatever came in at intake, if those are improved or resolved, really important indication that child is probably at the end. We also look for those issues to be resolved across all environments. So similar to the school and teacher question, right? So we want to make sure that at school, at home, in the playroom, and wherever else the child goes, we see resolution across all environments. It can't just be, well, he's gotten really good at home, but school is still a nightmare. Then there's still work to do, right? Third consideration, we want to see calm, steady, and stable behavior in the playroom. So the child comes in and is able to sit, to be calm, to be regulated. The play is stable and steady. It's consistent. Behavior in the playroom is also a helpful indication. And no new themes are emerging when the child comes in week to week. So we're pretty much just kind of in maintenance mode. Nothing new is emerging. We're kind of at that consistency in play. So those are the considerations for how we know that the child is ready to terminate. As far as if the child goes back to older themes and we see those repeated toward the end of therapy, that is very, very normal. We've talked about that in the collective and in the coaching program because that's a fear that a lot of therapists have. Oh no, I haven't seen aggression in so long. And now out of the blue, this kid's coming in and being completely aggressive again. What does that mean? Does that mean that he's regressing? Does that mean that there's something that happened? Does that mean that he doesn't feel ready to terminate? Don't concern yourself with all of those questions. It is very normal. It is shown in data that a child toward the end will revert toward more aggressive themes and earlier themes. And that is a part of the process. The way I like to describe it, just for the why, they often will revisit older themes to see if it still serves them in the way that it used to. So I used to have to come in here and get all of this aggression out, and I used to have to take all this power, and that made me feel better. Well, when they are starting to realize that they're on the tail end of their therapeutic journey, they will go back to that to see how it feels. Because they're essentially testing, do I still need this? And it's usually short-lived. You get little fits and spurts of it. It'll just kind of bubble up, be there, and then it'll go away again because they realize, A, they don't need it anymore. It doesn't serve them anymore. But B, they just wanted to kind of feel it out. And once they do, then they're kind of right back into the normal play again. So that is the way we recognize a child being ready for termination. And yes, it's completely normal to see that same scenario or that same theme re-emerging toward the end. All right, Pam from Texas, thank you so much for asking those questions, and that was really helpful. All right, ready to move on to question number 3. So this one is from Thailand. Hello to all my Thai friends. As a personal anecdote, our entire family, all 3 of us, love Thai food. And I have said for years that it's on my, if I had to make a top 10, where would I want to go in the world list, Thailand is 100% on my top 10 list. So I hope one day to make it there. We love the food. We love the people. Everything about Thailand is just so intriguing to me. So all of my Thai friends, thank you for listening, literally on the other half of the world. I'm so excited to have you. So this is from Bonus, not the actual name, but I was told to call because the name is really, really long. And I was told just say Bonus. So there we go. Bonus from Thailand. Thank you for reaching out and talking about this. So the question raised is, what do we do when a child lies, makes up stories, steals from the playroom, and is just very, very problematically behaving, stealing money? There's all kinds of stuff going on. So let me read the bulk of the email and then we'll talk through it. So, working with a 9-year-old girl, history of domestic violence from a former stepfather, resides with a new stepfather and mom, but the child has problematic behaviors at school, steals money, complains about unmet material needs, even though parents affirm that they have financial stability. So the girl is never satisfied, always wants more. That's basically what's going on. Also has a tendency to lie, tells conflicting stories. Recently, she took miniatures from the playroom, and despite efforts to address this behavior by informing her that I noticed specific things were missing right after the session, the latest incident involved her stealing dice. So I went to her right after and told her that I noticed the dice was missing, asked her if she'd seen it. She refused and made up stories. I was certain she was lying. I requested her to return it if she could and reminded her about the rules of the playroom, that everything should remain inside. This has been very challenging for me to navigate as I'm torn between empathy for her experience and addressing the disruptive behaviors. I would appreciate any insights or experiences you'd be willing to share. All right. So interestingly, we just watched a video of a child in the collective call that was in my playroom that was trying to steal one of the Lego pieces. And so 2 weeks ago, we just watched a clip of me addressing a child trying to steal something from the playroom. Well, not even steal it. Yeah, kind of steal it. 5-year-old stealing is they think that if they just turn their back, they turn around and so all you can see is their back, that all of a sudden you don't see them putting something in their pocket. So if we consider that trying to steal when you can literally see them putting it in their pocket, I don't know exactly what we call that. But anyway, so we just watched that clip. So Bonus, thank you so much for reaching out about this. And this is a really helpful thing to talk about. So by the way, if you would like access to that video and you want to go in and see me handling a child trying to take something from the playroom, join the collective and we save all of the recorded calls. So you'll be able to go in and watch and listen to that. But all right, I'll give you my thoughts too. So we have to figure out the why before we address this effectively. It doesn't change what we do or say, but the why matters when we're looking at behaviors, right? So this girl is lying. She's making up stories. She's stealing things. Why? We have to get to the root of what is driving this kind of behavior. Well, my gut tells me it can be one of several things. I think there's probably a control play here. It seems very much like a power and control dynamic. So this is an opportunity she has to have power. So if we understand that it's driven by power and control, that will help us understand the behavior in a new light, right? Second option is there's an attachment issue here. So she's probably very poorly attached, has very poor attachment to family members, possibly poor attachment to you, bonus, because there's a history of domestic violence and not being able to trust people. So there's probably some hesitancy from her end toward you as well. So attachment might be a factor here. And then another consideration is permanence. And we talked about this when we went through themes, right? So when a child is trying to work through what is true, what exists, even if I don't have the evidence of it, they often want to take things, hide things, bury things, keep things. That's a permanence issue. So all of those, maybe it's a combination of all three, one or more, but it's important to recognize what is driving the behavior so that it doesn't just seem frustrating, because we can have more acceptance when we understand where something is coming from. All right, so then how do we handle it? Here are my thoughts. Number one, in capital letters, not that I'm yelling, but it's important, patience. We have to have so much patience with kids that lie and steal, because there is no way to force them to stop. It's one of the few things over which they have power. So if they choose to lie and steal because it serves them in some way, they're going to lie and steal, and we don't have any way to stop it. We can set limits, we can give choices, we can enforce those limits. There's things we can do from a therapeutic standpoint, but we cannot physically stop a child from lying or from stealing. So it has to be a willful decision on behalf of the child. The child will eventually self-correct. The child will eventually self-control. The child will eventually self-regulate. But she's not there yet. So we are patient. And funny, one of the comments from one of the collective members when we watched that video, someone said, "Oh my gosh, you were so patient with that kid." And I have been told by a lot of people, strangely enough, quote, "You have the patience of Job," which, if you're not familiar with that biblical story, he was put under a lot of stress and bad situations, and he was just very patient to wait it out. So you have that concept of you just extend patience upon patience upon patience, because it has to be the child's choice and the child's awareness and the child becoming a better version. No child wants to lie. No child wants to steal. She's doing it because it's serving a need right now. We can't stop that need, and we can't force her not to do it at this moment. So we're just patient. That is my number one and best approach for a situation like this. It's just extending grace and patience, which is not easy or fun, but it is the best approach. Okay, then what do? We set limits. So we have to make sure we're using the full ACT process, right? We acknowledge the feeling, we communicate the neutral limit, we target the alternatives. We have to make it very clear that the toys are for staying in the playroom. And that limit is expressed again and again and again, giving the child the opportunity to comply with the choice. Then we move to ultimate choice giving if the child can't comply with the limit. So then it's if you choose, then you choose, right? And we go through that process again and again. But the point is we give the child the opportunity to practice complying. We don't insist, we don't enforce, we don't grab something out of their hand. We don't do any of those things. We give them the opportunity to choose to comply. And they don't always choose that at first. Sometimes toys go home in kids' pockets or in kids' hands or in kids' mouths or in kids' shoes or whatever clever place they find to hide it. Sometimes they go home with kids because they can't at that moment choose to comply, but eventually they do. So we wait it out, we set limits, and we provide choices. The only other suggestion that I have for that is you can also use I wonder statements. So in the case with the kid trying to steal the Lego, it wasn't even a Lego, it was a gem. So it was like a blue diamondy gem. So it was amazing, right? Like the allure was so strong. And I don't have one of those at home, and I just really want to have it. And it was this whole thing. Okay. So after he put it in his pocket and then told me that it was no longer in his pocket because he put his hand in his pocket, took the gem out of his pocket, and then showed me his pocket was empty. So I said, "Oh, you showed me that it's not in your pocket. I wonder what's in your hand." So then he transferred it to his other hand. And I said, oh, you're showing me that hand's empty. I wonder what's in your other hand now. So then he transfers it back and shows me his left hand. And I said, I wonder if you can show me both hands at the same time. So that is a way that you can address trying to give the child an opportunity to choose to leave it with you. Notice that you're not saying, give it back to me. Notice that you're not saying you can't take it. Notice that you're not saying you're not leaving until you. Don't ever threaten a child, please, y'all. Don't ever, ever threaten a child. Don't let parents threaten their kids. They learn nothing about self-control when they're threatened. That was a bonus freebie. Okay, I'm back. So we don't do any of those things, but we give children as many opportunities as possible to comply with the limit. And guess what? My little guy chose to leave his blue diamond Lego piece before he left. He took it with him out of the playroom, but he left it with me before he got in his car. Okay, so that is how we handle a scenario like that. It's a lot of patience. Lying, stealing, cheating kids can be difficult to test our resolve to stay child-centered. So one of you is going to give in. It's not going to be you. Don't forget that. We talk about that mantra a lot. All right, bonus from Thailand. Thank you so much for that question. I hope that that was helpful for you. All right, so my next question is from a lady in California who has asked to remain anonymous, so I'm going to just say J. And this question is about why I think child-centered is more appropriate than directive methods. Go for the big guns. Holy moly. Okay. So I read that and I'm like, wow, we're just going to go. Okay. So let me read parts of Jay's email and then I'll help you hear my thoughts. So she says, I love child-led therapy. My personality is more suited to it. I'm not comfortable feeling like I'm in a teacher role. I would rather let kids lead and reflect content, name the feelings, set minimal limits, etc., as in CCPT. My colleagues don't think it's therapy. I'm quoting now. My colleagues don't think it's therapy if you let a kid come into the room, play without structure or teaching appropriate behaviors, or without teaching them specific skills or leading activities. End quote. Okay, I'm going to pause there because there's more to the question. But I'm honest to a fault, and you're going to get my opinion and my 2 cents. So you asked for it. Here it is. Your colleagues are wrong, Jay. And I don't say that to be spiteful. I don't say that to be angry. I don't say that with judgment. I just want to make it very clear. Child-centered play therapy is therapy. So anyone that tells you otherwise, they're wrong. That's as succinct as I can be with my commentary on that. I'm not even going to go further with it. If we can't all agree that child-centered play therapy is therapy, then everything we do is useless. So your colleagues are wrong, Jay, and I don't mean that in a mean way. I just want you to know you have the mental capacity to recognize that no matter what they say, it doesn't make it true. Okay, so now that I've shared my piece on that, now I'll keep going. So the next question, how and why do you see non-directive play more effective than directive models? Are there certain issues where you see non-directive most effective, such as with younger ages, or for self-esteem or mood, rather than behaviors? I know that all models are valid and effective, and you don't want to discredit the directive ones. That is true. I don't want to discredit them. I just disagree. But I'd love to know how you compare them in achieving change, and specifically how you see non-directive as more effective than directive. All right, so you asked for it, Jay. Here it goes. I just went to concerts 2 nights in a row, last Thursday and Friday. We went to see Larry Fleet and Dalton Dover on Thursday night. Fantastic. And then we went to see Carly Pearce and Tim McGraw on Friday. For those of you non-country music fans, you have no idea who I'm talking about, but they're all country music artists. So great concerts. And I love all of those artists. So it just filled me up with four artists and concerts worth of greatness. So I'm bringing this up for a reason. I'm not just telling you about my week. All right. So one of Carly Pearce's songs is called Tell You What He Didn't Do. I think that might be a paraphrase of the lyrics, but Tell You What He Didn't Do, I think is what it's called. And this is what comes to mind when I hear your question, Jay. And when I'm thinking through why do I think non-directive play is more effective than directive models, and how do I find it more effective, and how do I compare them, etc. So Carly Pearce's song starts out with the premise that she and her husband, this is actually, she wrote this song and it's true about her life. So she had recently gotten divorced. And the song starts and says, everyone's asking what happened. How did it all go wrong? And then she proceeds to say, but my mom always told me if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. So I'm not going to air the dirty laundry. I'm not going to tell you all the things that he did, but I'll tell you what he didn't do. He didn't treat me right. He didn't put me first. He wasn't a man of his word. So I'm not going to tell you all the things he did, but I'll tell you all the things he didn't do. All right, so here's where I'm going with this. I am not going to tell you all of the things that I don't like about directive models, but I will tell you all the things that I like about child-centered models. So I think I'm trying to be as diplomatic as possible with my Carly Pierce version here. So here we go. When you look at child-centered approach, you allow a child to have longitudinal gain, longitudinal outcomes. And that's a big word, so let me unpack that for you. We see evidence that long-term, many years after therapy, children that have been in a child-centered play therapy approach still have those skills, still possess those tools, and are still benefiting from them years afterwards. Okay, so why do I think child-centered is better? Because it allows a child to, for the rest of their life, benefit from what they've gained from the child-centered approach. Secondly, it is not situational. Child-centered play therapy is not situational. It's not environmental. It's not specific to one behavior, one issue, one struggle, one anything. So, if you have a child that has crippling anxiety and will not eat mozzarella sticks because he choked on one and now is scared to death of eating, okay, we can do a directive approach. We can desensitize a child to food. We can give them strategies for when you sit down to eat, what you're going to do so that you're not consumed with worry about choking again. But that's situationally specific, it's environmentally specific, and it's for that one specific issue. Whereas the child-centered approach equips the child with coping and resilience and emotional vocabulary and understanding of feelings and problem-solving skills and bigger worldview and better self-esteem. And I could go on and on and on. So if we directively address the eating issue at 7, might the child conquer the eating issue at 7? I would hope so. But what happens when another fear emerges at 9? No coping skills were built at 7 that universally apply. We only built coping skills for the eating of the mozzarella sticks at 7. Child-centered play therapy equips a child universally with all of that stuff that applies forever in the future. That's my second thought. My third is kids are not rational. They don't have abstract reasoning. They're not cognitive and logical beings until 13. So unless we're waiting until kids are 14 to use directive interventions with them, it's not age appropriate. It's not developmentally appropriate. It's not sensitive to a child's needs. A child cannot be expected to learn something cognitively in their head and process things at a cognitive level until they have abstract reasoning at 13. And I'm pausing. We call these a pregnant pause. I love that phrase. This is a pregnant pause on purpose. Y'all, why would we do that to a kid? A kid that does not have the developmental capacity to process things cognitively, to be rational and reasonable and think through something, they can't do it. They feel their way through it. Why would we think that the best approach would be to force them to try to do something that they can't do? We don't force a baby to walk. Why? Because a child can't walk until they can walk. Why would we require a child to do something that they don't have the developmental capacity to do? I think it's harmful, and I think it's insensitive, and I think it is very well intended, but very poorly executed. The child-centered model is developmentally appropriate so that the child is able to process things the way that they process things. We're not asking them to do something they're not capable of doing. So that's my point number 3. And my final point is, you have the universalization of everything that they learn, and it snowballs. So as a child gets more self-confident, their behavior gets better. As their behavior gets better, they problem solve better. As they problem solve better, they feel better about themselves. As they feel better about themselves, they behave in more self-enhancing ways. Then their social interactions improve. Then their academics improve. Then they feel better about themselves. Then their self-esteem grows. That everything swirls and everything gets universalized, where they take it with them forever, and everything begets growth in all other areas. So, Jay in California, I got a little passionate there for a second, but it kind of gets under my skin because I just don't think that there's sensitivity to what a child is capable of managing from a directive approach. So that is why I think the child-centered model is more effective. I would love to hear from you all. Maybe you have some other ideas. Maybe you think I didn't cover all of the reasons why child-centered is more effective. Shoot me an email. I'd love to hear from you. Brenna@thekidcounselor.com. All right, Jay from California, thank you. Last and final one. We're almost done, y'all. I might get you out in 40 minutes. We'll see. All right. Lexi from Minnesota actually asked quite a few questions, but they all are kind of sort of connected. So she said, I want to apply concepts to practice. So she talked about her playroom specifically. It has a desk with paperwork and books, and there's a closet with some snacks in it and stuff like that. How do I adapt the playroom to these circumstances? You really don't have to. I have tons and tons and tons of people that I train all over the world that don't have a dedicated playroom, and there are other things in there. So you just make it very clear what is part of the playroom and what isn't. You set limits when needed. Kids know the difference. So if they walk over to the closet and you say, oh, you're curious about what's in there, but that's not part of the playroom. The playroom's over here. They understand that. They comply with it. No big deal. Next question. If there are immediate safety concerns, self-harm or suicidal actions, where do you start? Do you do safety plans? Okay, from a purely child-centered perspective, we do not do safety plans. However, I do think it is ethical and appropriate to, number 1, document. Number 2, reflect and respond in the same way we would if they shared anything else. See if the child is willing to reveal more information. And then 3rd, we can always use I wonder statements to assess for the immediacy of that. So for example, if a child says, yeah, I wanted to die when that happened. If you feel that you actually need to get a sense of what that means, you reflect first, because remember, we're not trying to lead. We're not trying to gain information. We're not trying to interrogate. That's not child-centered. So we would say, oh, I wonder when you felt that way. Oh, like last year when I was in 3rd grade. Oh, okay. That's a very different response than this morning, right? So you can always use an I wonder statement to get a sense of what's going on and what the immediacy concern is. But we do not go through we're going to create a safety plan and we're going to ask you all these questions and whatever. They don't have abstract reasoning, as we've talked about, unless they're 14. And that just does not align with the ability of the child to be in charge. And keep in mind, often a child brings a sensitive topic like that up as a test. So we talked about this in the collective as well. If a child senses for a second that you can't handle it, that it's freaking you out, that you're worried, that you're going to tell their parents, that there's any kind of concern from your end other than complete neutrality and acceptance, they're done. The conversation is done. They're never going to bring it up again. They're never going to talk to you about it again. So it's our job. We have one chance. It's our job to be completely child-centered and make sure that they feel unconditionally accepted, so that whatever they need to process can be processed. Okay, next question. The child goes into the closet, used all the bubbles, the lotion, dumped them out for a craft, finds tea and cuts each tea bag open, every bag of tea, and dumps the tea out for their art project. Then the child put additional things in their art project to take home. So the child wanted to use everything, all of it, even wanted to add toys and sand inside of a balloon to bring home, therefore taking toys from the playroom. I don't have resources to buy all new lotion and all new bubbles each week. Do I remove these items and have less available? All right. We always can set a limit on anything that we need to with our 3 questions that we ask. So is this limit necessary? Can I consistently enforce this limit? And can I allow this behavior to continue if I don't set a limit and still accept the child? So if we process those in this scenario, if you are feeling frustrated by the consumption of all of this and going, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to replace all this. I don't have the money. This is making an absolute mess. If any of that's going on, it's getting in the way of your unconditional acceptance of the child. It's getting in your way of your engagement relationally with the child. So you would absolutely set a limit on that. So that might be ACT first and then an if-then choice, right? So it might be you're really enjoying putting all of those things in there, but those are for everyone to use. If you choose to use tea in your art project, you choose to use 1 or you can choose to use 2. Which do you choose? Then you're still giving permission to do what they want to do, but there's a limit on consumption of quantity, right? And you have to use the why in a scenario like that. That's really important. We've talked about that a lot in the coaching. When a child is given a limit, it is helpful for them to understand why the limit's being set. Notice that I said, because those are for every child to be able to use. So that is the why. It's not just that I don't want you to use it all. It's that there won't be any left for everyone else. So the why matters. Or it might be, you're really having fun with the lotion, but the lotion can make a mess. So you can choose to use it up here, or you can choose to use it over here so that it doesn't create a mess. There's the why, right? So make sure that the why is worked in when you do have to set those limits. Okay, next question. What about when the child wants to have you close your eyes? Oh, let me tell you my ninja trick for when a child wants you to close their eyes, wants you to close your eyes. You don't just close your eyes and then try to squint and peek because they always catch you. So what you do is you put your hands up over your eyes and then you keep your eyes open, but you look through the slats between your fingers. So think about what baseball players do when it's a really sunny day and they're trying to track a ball into the outfield. They actually hold their glove up and they look through the slats in their glove because the glove blocks the sun, but they can still see through the slits in their leather glove. You're essentially doing that same thing with your fingers. So you actually will hold your hands up over your eyes, cover your eyes and cheeks with your hands, and then you can keep your eyes open, but the child cannot tell that your eyes are open because your fingers are blocking your eyes, but you can still see through the slits in your fingers. So that is the ninja trick when a child tells you to close your eyes, and then you can still see what's going on. So the question continued. Then she filled my hands with globs of lotion, then the tea, then poured bubbles into my hands, then wants you to touch your face with the lotion. How do you respond? Do you clean yourself up before returning to the lobby? Can I set a limit on not putting things on my face and hair if that makes me uncomfortable? 100% yes. So if you don't mind it being in your hands, then you would just say, you can choose to put all of that in my hands, but I choose not to touch my face with it because it will make a mess. Or I choose not to touch my hair with it because I won't be able to get it out of my hair. So notice that you're saying I choose. It's not necessarily a limit for the child, but it is your boundary and your limit within what's happening in the play. So the child can choose to put lotion and tea and bubbles all over your hands, but you are choosing not to touch your face and not to touch your hair. Now, if the child was trying to touch your face and your hair, then you would set a limit on that. So you can choose to put that here or here so that then it's clear that your face is not for touching, right? But I'm not for touching. But since she was asking you to do it, then you would say, but I choose not to touch my face or my hair because it's going to make a mess. So in all of those, Lexi, it sounds like the common theme is your concern of when and why you would set a limit. So I hope that that's helpful because I think that that's kind of an undercurrent in all of those questions, is how do I handle that? And one final thought about the craft. I want to circle back to that. You said, do I remove any of these items and have less available? This is a judgment call that every clinician needs to make. If you cannot accept behavior with certain toys or certain things in your playroom, don't have them in there. You have to be fully accepting of whatever a child tries to do with them, or you shouldn't have them in there. I don't have liquid paint in my room because I got to a point where it just made me mad every time a kid used it. So I now have watercolor paint in there. I don't have glitter in my playroom because I got sick of trying to vacuum it in my room. So I don't have glitter anymore. I don't have sequins anymore. I don't have anything that drives me crazy because I can't handle it. So you need to decide, are you okay with bubbles? And you just have to limit the use of them. Are you okay with bubbles? You have to limit the quantity that's used. Bubbles are not inherently a problem unless they pour the entire bottle on the floor and then it's a soapy, bubbly mess. That's really hard to clean up. So is the limit how they use it, how much they use, or do you just not want bubbles in there altogether? You need to decide for yourself. That is an every clinician decision. What can you accept and what can you not? And then move accordingly. However, once you have something in the room, we don't ever want to remove it for one child. In other words, every other kid is fine with bubbles, but this kid always has a problem with bubbles, so this kid isn't going to get bubbles. We don't ever do that. We give the child the opportunity to practice self-control, and we leave the bubbles in there, and we set appropriate limits. And we try to avoid that by just saying, oh, I just won't put bubbles in there. But that's not child-centered. So final thought on that. All right, y'all, I did not make my 40-minute mark, but I did make 46, so I'm going to be pretty pleased with that. All right, thank you so much to all of you who wrote in. I really am trying to bang through these questions, so we'll do another lightning round soon. Brenna at the Kid Counselor. You can also call if you would like, 813-812-5525. I love y'all. Again, check out the collective, ccptcollective.com. Love to see you in there. I love each and every one of you. You know that. We'll talk again soon. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Play Therapy Podcast with Dr. Brenna Hicks. For more episodes and resources, please go to www.playtherapypodcast.com.